Hello and welcome to the YBMB live show. Those of you who've been following, and there's many of you now, will know that we run this 3 times a week. We run it Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays around midday. And Mondays we talk about body, all things body, and Wednesdays we talk about mindset, and Fridays business. And the aim is always to leave you with some hints and tips that you can go and implement, and also tell you a little bit about the YBMB program. And sometimes I'm lucky enough to have a guest with me to discuss a particular subject. And today's one of those days. I'm super happy to have Nita with me. And Nita is so interesting because she knows all about the area of astrology. And she's an intuitive medium as well as an astrologer. And she's had these gifts, which she'll tell us about, since she was a child. And I was introduced, very strongly recommended to Nita by someone that I very much trust. So Nita, thanks so much for joining us. Lovely to see you today.
Thank you so much, Angela. I'm excited to be here and talk about astrology and how I could possibly help your listeners with their businesses, right?
Well, definitely. I think, if we start off with, because there's so many areas we could delve into, obviously the whole world of mediums and what that means, and the sort of advice that people that have passed might be able to give us. But for today, I really wanted to focus more on the astrology side. And most of us understand, when we think about astrology, we think about the stars, and then we think about horoscopes. And we, to varying degrees, will have a read about horoscope. I'm a Leo, and I might know a little bit about the traits and recognize it sometimes. And then, we sort of move on and go about our day very often. And I think a lot of people go to horoscopes when they're thinking, for example, about their love life, but not necessarily about their business. And so maybe if we could start with a bit of an intro about astrology and yourself as well, how you got into it, and give us an overview of what we ought to be looking for and what we can learn.
Sure, thank you. Well, I've been an intuitive medium since I was little. I could see dead people since I was little.
Right.
My friends were little orbs that I could see, and they've been my constant companions. And so I got into astrology when, honestly, like so many people, when your life is in absolute turmoil, you seek something greater, something outside of yourself that you cannot figure out on your own. So my intuitive gifts got me so far, and then I was like, okay, my life was relentless, ruthless, one humiliation after another. And honestly, I didn't have this bright smile that I have today. I was very, very depressed, very suicidal, and just couldn't understand why I couldn't find any stability in my life at all, especially financial and jobs. And I was living in the US for 25 years, and I tossed up my whole life when I was like, okay, the astrology was so clear to me that I needed to leave. It was not the right place for me. I felt it, forever in a day. I came back to the UK. But for the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've been consulting the stars, the planets. And when I finally synced up with the stars and the planets, I finally felt, after 30 years of struggling, I felt that I was back where I was supposed to be. Every day I wake up and I feel completely aligned with my path and purpose, and everything just flows. As I've surrendered to my blueprint, which is known as your natal chart in astrology.
Right. Okay. So that's the first thing to ask you, I suppose. And I think what you said there is that there is like a blueprint that maybe is that sort of destiny, is that fate, is that what's meant to happen to us, but we just don't know it yet? Is it all sort of planned out?
Yeah, it is sort of planned out, right? Some people believe in fate, some people don't. The blueprint that I speak of is basically, it's known as your natal chart. And you are the whole sum of your chart. You're not just your sun sign. You're not just your moon sign. So The natal chart is a snapshot of the sky at the moment that you were born. Now that is frozen, that doesn't shift and change. And it also is a map of your past, and you can follow your present moment, and you can definitely follow your future. And the way that you follow your future is to also understand where the planets are rotating around our sun at the present moment. And then because we've figured out astrology and astronomy these days, and there's so many calculations that are quite accurate, we can then go, okay, so for example, Saturn is going to be in the sign of, currently in the sign of Aquarius, and it's going to be there for the next 2 years. What is it? How is it going to impact me? Do I have, at the time that I was born, do I have any planets in the sign of Aquarius? Because Saturn is definitely going to affect you. So if there's any sun sign Aquarius, moon sign Aquarius out there, Saturn is definitely going to make some impacts in your life. I'm an Aquarius, and is definitely making some significant impacts in my life. So you can definitely map out your future.
And I mean, obviously I say obviously, I believe that there are 12, maybe 13 star signs. I heard there was a new one introduced a couple of years ago. And sometimes when I read it, so if I read my star sign, part of me thinks, wow, that's absolutely right what it's saying. I can really relate to that. But then the other part of me thinks, but then that means that that's the same for all the other Leos. And I know lots of other Leos doing all sorts of different things, having great times, not so great times. So how do you, I suppose then you need to go to this other layer that you're talking about, is it, in terms of, you talked about the houses, and so could you explain that to us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't got into the 13th dimension. As humans, we are actually entering 13 dimension. So it's interesting that we have found this new planet that astrology is trying to introduce. So there are 12 signs, constellations that we work with, and 12 houses. So you know a little bit of astrology, that's good. And the 12 houses.
Talking to you a bit as well. I'm reading around your subject after talking to you, that's all.
Oh, yeah, great.
Yeah.
So the 12 houses basically represent the 12 aspects of living here on Earth, from the body, from the home, your past is on there, your present certainly is on there, and then where you're trying to get to is on there. And then everything in between, from love, relationships, to marriage, commitment, business, partnerships, and also daily life, which could also be jobs, and your inner resources, which is one that we kind of look for when we talk about business. What are your inner resources? What are your gifts? What are your talents? Are they conscious in you? Are they subconscious? And so there are, on the astrology chart, there are houses that we look at that will tell us, when's a good time to plan your business, start your business, launch it. Also, it will tell you, what are your best qualities, where are your weaknesses? And weaknesses aren't terrible, right? I mean, people think weaknesses are bad, but they're really not. So you can make friends with the parts of you that are really strong, and you can also discover what's your true path and purpose. That's what really happened for me. It was like I was in corporate for 20 some years. I was miserable, and when I consulted the stars, it was like, it was right there. I was meant to be self-employed. I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And when I surrendered in 2017, I lost my job. great job, but I got sold out to the very
Right.
company that I outsourced. And I said, that's it. Like for 2 years, I couldn't find a job. Nobody was giving me a job. Luckily, I had my spiritual practice on the side. And like I said, I tossed up my whole life and moved out of America.
Well, they say that there's a saying, a saying I love, which is life happens for you, not to you. And sometimes there is this sort of greater power that in the end forces you down a particular route you're meant to be down, whether you like it or not. And it's quite a nice sort of way of thinking about things, because I suppose, you know, there are a lot of people that discover things later in life that they never realized they had a talent in, or they never realized they were going to be good at. And some people, I suppose, will never ever find it, or does everybody sort of find their true sort of path ultimately?
That's a good question. And the best way I can answer that is I think some of us just have an awakening. And when we have that awakening, and it's usually some crisis in our lives that jots us awake, and that is what I call fate. When we talk about fate and free will and choice, well, you might be fated to have that awakening, but it's your free will and choice of whether you're going to act and be proactive, and you know, whether it's you got to go get some counseling and you got to go do some training, you've got to take the progressive road towards something greater, which, as we all know, people who've gone through transformation, I know that you take people through transformations, that transformation is not easy, right? And a lot of people don't want to put in that hard work, but once you do, the rewards are absolutely amazing. So right now, like Saturn is in Aquarius, and just before this year turn, it was in what's known as a conjunction with Jupiter. Jupiter is this planet of expansion, growth, but it's also lazy, because when you feel good with Jupiter, you're like, oh, I can sit on the beach and drink a Mai Tai and my life will just fall into my lap. And it's not always like that, right? So Saturn asks you to do the hard work, and once you do, the rewards are there. So to answer your question, I think it's quite individual, isn't it?
I think, yeah, it is. And so I suppose if somebody's not going to take the action, they're never, their true fate, their true potential will never materialize. And if you take the view that, well, you know, it'll all unfold and happen, that's one way of thinking. A lot of people do think that. They just say, look, you know, the universe is going to give me what I deserve, and I just have to sort of wait for it. But you do have to take this action as well. If you want to hurry it along, you know, there's a lot of people that are impatient, people like me, you know, you want to drive things forward. And so you want to find out this stuff and sort of, you know, don't wait for it. I mean, what would you say about that? I mean, what can people do to sort of fulfill their true potential faster, or would you advise against that? I mean, particularly from a business perspective, what's your thoughts on that?
I think I truly believe when it's your time to shine, it's your time to shine. And in astrology, we talk about cycles. So when you're in a rhythmic cycle, you sync with the cycles, you're going to have less tension and less of a constricted energy, where the universe is just going, okay, it's not your time, it's not your time. And even though you try to push forward, nothing happens. So then you get more and more frustrated. So to answer your question, I would say you're going to have an easier time if you can flow and sync up with the charts and the cycles. So when you were talking about people who, you know, don't take action, well, they're going to be in that cycle for a while, until the next cycle comes around and you have a massive reset, and then you have another opportunity. I mean, I do think that in life we consistently have opportunities to grow. It's just a matter of, you know, how many ups and downs that people are going to go through before they have that ultimate breakthrough in their lives. Because I think as humans, we seek evolution, we seek, to grow and mature. I think most maybe not everybody. So to answer your question, it really behooves people to be, sync with their cycles. But if someone wants to launch something, like somebody wants to, begin a project and start working on, let's say, the research and the foundation, and then maybe do a softer launch and gradually build. So when they get to, let's say, an aspect on the chart that is going to really help them skyrocket in their business, then sure, because they've already done all the work to gradually move towards this, sort of apex.
So we see, we hear this phrase, it's written in the stars. I guess that refers to the fact that, this is sort of mapped out, and there are many, many more layers to look into and investigate individually beyond just our straightforward horoscope, which is the thing that's become popular. So if someone wanted to find out a little bit more, I mean, obviously they would come to you and you could read their whole chart. Or if they were trying to sort of start to read around the subject, what's the first thing they would look at? Because they would read their horoscope first, and there's many places they can go to sort of get an in-depth perspective on the type of person they are and all of that. But I mean, how do they sort of move a bit further in and find out a bit more about what's actually mapped out?
Yeah, great question, Angela. I would recommend, I go to astro.com. I use astro.com a lot. And I use an app called Astro Matrix. I'm not plugging it because I don't not paid to plug it. It's just a great app.
Yeah.
You put in your birth details. If you don't know your time of birth, you can just put unknown. And you'll at least be able to see where all the planets are lying in which constellation, which sign. And you can begin to look, sort of bit by bit. Okay, my moon, let's say, is in Sagittarius. That's where mine is. So you've kind of got like a quick way of switching your emotions. And Sagittarius is a mutable sign. So you can go and look at each little planet.
So of all the planets, are they? Because sorry to interrupt. So we've got, like, we've all got a moon, and then we've all got a perspective of Saturn, have we? And all of and how many planets? Because I mean, I remember the 9 or 10 planets that you learn at school. But I mean, how many planets do we look at?
There's 11 planets that we work with.
Yeah.
The personal planets, as they're known as, are your sun, your moon. The sun is you. If you think about it, you're the center of attention. The sun is in the middle of our solar system. It's your life, your chi. It can also be your body, your vitality, your identity. It's like that first impression that people have. Oh, you feel like this or this. And then your moon is your feelings, your emotional personality. And Venus is your likes, your dislikes. And then Mercury is for communication. So the way that you would communicate, let's say somebody who has, trying to think, Mercury in Leo, for instance. They're quite fiery, they're quite they probably articulate quite well, but Leos can be very generous, very showy. So the way that they will communicate is through that Leo energy. And so the personal planets are really more to do with you. And then there's sort of the social planets like Saturn and Jupiter, and this is how you navigate, the world. And then there's the outer planets. Now, the outer planets are like further away, where you can't see them with your naked eye. So Jupiter, Pluto, oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus. What am I missing? Am I missing something? I feel like I'm missing something, but those are the ones that you can't see. And that is more of the cosmic universal sort of energy that influences a larger movement. And so, you know, we can definitely look at all of your entire sum of your chart, basically.
And practically speaking, if you were to find all of this out, either by looking at the sort of websites you suggest and sort of really reading into it, or coming to yourself for a reading or reading of your chart, creation of the chart, practically speaking, I guess that then would give you some guidelines, would it, in terms of business, when to make decisions, when to buy things, don't buy things. I mean, hire people, grow, contract. Have you got some sort of, is that the sort of thing that it would tell you?
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a little bit of finessing, but if you look up, you know, things online, you'll be able to find, you know, blurbs of information. There's lots of people doing lots of YouTube stuff. So for business, you want to look at the second house. Your inner resources. It's the material possessions, what you value. If you value something, you will be much more you'll put more energy into it, right? It's your self-worth, your self-esteem, and your material possessions. The sixth house is your daily grind. I call it who you're serving and why you're serving them. If you're at your job and you're just serving someone else and it is not fulfilling, most people feel really dead in their jobs, right? So but it's also your routine, your daily stuff, right? People with a lot of planets in the sixth house tend to be really very analytical, but they can have a bit of tunnel vision because they're only in their daily grind. They're they're not always the bigger picture people. The eighth house is money, the debt that you create. It could also be karmic debt, so you want to be really careful of that. So, and then seventh house is partnerships. It's associated with love relationships, but it's also business partnerships. And it's also open enemy. So be careful of who you make your contracts with.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the 10th house is the last one. The 10th house is basically how you want to be perceived in the public eye. Some people who have a sun in their 10th house can marry wealthy.
Yeah. So when you actually create this chart for people, you can tell them or give them an indication at least as to what's going on for them in each of these houses.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So like for me, when I was getting into astrology, I started getting readings because I didn't know anything myself. And as I was getting readings, I was like, wow, this, and then things started to come true. I was like, there's something in there. So I started to, you know, I was self-taught. And I started taking classes with some astrologers that I liked. And people said, oh, you know, Saturn's coming into your second house and tighten your purse strings. I thought, oh, what are they talking about? Sure enough, Saturn has been screwing with my money for the last couple of years. But Pluto's also there. And so I had this massive reinvention of how I was going to, you know, how I was going to earn my money. And I lost my job and I never got a job again. And I just, in my north, something called a north node is in there, which is where you're going, where you're heading in life. And opposite your north node is known as a south node. That's your past, where you have come from. And to make friends with your north node isn't easy because it's not something that is readily available to you. So you know, understanding your north node is another thing that I would sort of say to people. If you don't know anything about astrology, look at the north node. that will really help you to understand where you're heading in this lifetime. It will might even give you indications of your ultimate path and purpose. So when
Fascinating.
Saturn came into my second house, it definitely restricted the amount of money that was coming in. And now I'm coming into a place where more prosperity is coming into my life.
And it's amazing if you're armed with that information, I guess as well, it will make you more focused, more positive. So, but if you're also armed with, warnings, as it were, then it will make you a bit more circumspect and maybe not take some leaps that otherwise you might have done. So all good stuff, really. I think the more that you can know, the better. You mentioned the present lifetime, and that's just sort of veering off today's topic a little bit, because that's also fascinating. And knowing that you're an intuitive medium as well. Is there several lifetimes, or when you say present lifetime, that makes me think that there are more?
I believe in past lives. I have definitely done past life regressions. Sometimes I'll just be traveling somewhere and I'll have like a movie play out. So my visions are really strong. I could just be sitting in a room and have visions. But everybody doesn't believe in past lives. So anybody who doesn't believe in past lives, I mean, I respect everybody's, everybody's filters. So if you don't believe in past lives, that's okay. But your ancestral footprint is still on your chart. So that south node that I was talking about, that's one to look for. And the fourth house is our foundation, our home, the imprint of our ancestors. It can be our parents, of course, but our ancestors, so for instance, and this is an extreme instance, so please don't take this to heart, but let's say, you consistently have had alcoholism in your heritage. Where is that coming from? Is it maternal, paternal? It might give you some indication. But if you do have that on your chart, you might be the person who's come in to break those patterns. And if you do have it in the chart, because it is at the bottom of the chart, so the bottom of the chart is the more unconscious stuff. In simple psychology, it's learned behavior. And sometimes learned behavior isn't necessarily something that is within you. Because my dad was an alcoholic, but I'm not an alcoholic. So I can learn from my father's mistakes, if you will.
And when you were saying earlier, you said at the beginning that even as a child you were seeing dead people all the time. That is also, and I think this could be another topic of interview, because I know people are fascinated by that as well, particularly when they lose loved ones. When my dad sadly died a couple of years ago, you sort of look for signs and you believe that you see signs and things like that. So maybe we'll finish up with it, maybe some comments from you on that. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Do people that have passed, do they try and leave you signs? Is there a connection between that and astrology? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear of your dad and losing your father.
Thank you.
You can definitely see if someone's got those kind of esoteric gifts on someone's chart. I do. My Neptune is what's known as in my first house on my ascendant, so massive psychic abilities. So you can see those on the astrology chart. And we're all born with intuitive gifts. Jung talks about the 4 functions that we're born with, which is intuitive, feeling, sensate, and emotions, which pretty much comprises of, our human existence. And so it's, you can develop that for sure. And I had it, just those gates very open, those channels very open when I was younger. And I think we all do, just to give a glimpse, very simple in life, when you just have that you have a visceral reaction to something or somebody, or somewhere you're like, my intuition is telling me I probably should just not do that thing. But then you go and do it and you're like, God, I just shouldn't have done it. I knew it. My instincts were telling me. That's intuition as well. And I think, to answer your question about loved ones leaving, when people are grieving, and I do have people who come to me for the mediumship, when people are grieving, I just say, they're just in another room. It's a room that isn't, this tangible room like we are sitting in right now, but they're just sitting in another room, in another realm, and you can talk to them. But when people are grieving, it's very difficult for them to connect. So loved ones come through signs, like you were saying.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that these are tremendous subjects to sort of discuss, and you can do it at length, and there's so much to sort of delve into. But I think sort of the key takeaway from people who are listening to this from a business perspective is that there are particular houses behind their sign where, and you rattled off 3 or 4 or 5 of them, where they relate to things like business, money, relationships, partnerships, things like that. So if you want to delve into that and sort of arm yourself with yet more ammunition and tools before you make a big decision, then you can do so. And part of that would be coming to you and getting you to do it for them, because obviously, you've got the professional background there, or to look at it online. But you also run courses as well, don't you, to teach people to do this?
Yes, I will be running a boot camp, a 3-day workshop. It's going to be either at the end of May or the beginning of June. And it's really simple. Like, I give you very, very simple steps, 4 easy steps to look at your chart, and very quickly read it and go, oh, okay, this and this will, here's my hidden personalities. Here's my, here's where I could be heading. And I teach you how to connect with the planets, and I teach you how to connect with the constellations. So it's a real foundational course, but it gives you more than enough to at least begin to tap into your own natal chart. And then obviously, if you want to go further, you certainly can.
Yeah.
And the other part is just to give everybody another little tidbit is new moons. New moons are great times to also start projects. And again, do look to see if there's anything that might be restrictive, but new moon is like a new beginning. So that's a good time to start.
And we've got the next new moon. When is it? Quite soon, isn't it?
We just had a new moon a couple of days ago, so on the 12th. So new moons happen, the cycles are every approximately 28 days. So the next one won't be in, I think it's May 10th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, excellent. So that's the time for new beginnings. Well, look, that's been so brilliant. And so on YBMB, the reason that I think we've been successful with our transformations is that we take a very holistic approach. And I was just, I posted something this morning to say that there was a lady in her 50s, one of my clients, lovely, very professional and talented woman, but she said to me she couldn't believe that she spent so long being, overweight and not in the position, in the job that she really wanted and deserved, but it proved elusive to her up until this point. And within 3 months of working on YBMB, she's got back to the weight that she was in her 20s and achieved, this amazing new job. And we have loads and loads of examples like that. And I think it's because we have such a holistic approach, because success ultimately in anything, not just business or body, it is about utilizing all the tools at our disposal. And that's, I think, strong body, strong mind, strong relationships. And in the case in point today is also looking at, what fate is sort of mapped out for us and what's written in the stars, as we said. And so I like to try and accommodate all of those different techniques and strategies. So if anyone's interested in finding out more about our next season, YBMB, then there'll be a link below that they can click on. And certainly I want to incorporate in that, now, especially now I've spoken to Nita in a bit more detail today, some of that content. But if you're also wanting to go direct to Nita, you can. We'll incorporate a link here. And I think, obviously, I don't want to take up too much of your time now, Nita, but is there anything else that you could add for us just as a key takeaway?
I think we've covered so much. I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. This was absolutely delightful. And I just love your business. It really is the whole body mind shift. And, you know, to anybody who is struggling, I can tell you that I was at the brink of suicide, giving up, and I've had that so much over my life that somehow I managed to get up again. Somehow I managed to find that internal strength. And it is having these great communities like Angela to, you know, empower yourself and take ownership of what you can change in your life versus what you cannot change immediately. Because what you can take control of is, you know, shifting the mindset really, and shifting the body. Like me right now, the gyms have got back open again. I am going after this call. So
brilliant.
Thank you so much for all that you are also doing, Angela. It's amazing.
Well, I'm really glad we've connected. I'm sure everybody is going to be fascinated, and we'll do some more of this. So thank you, Nita. Have a lovely day.
You
Enjoy
too.
the gym. And I'll talk to you again soon. And thank you, everybody, for listening.